Okay, hello and welcome to the Natural Birth Summit. Today's session is titled Best Start for Baby, Impact of Choices and Events in Birth. Today we are fortunate to have Rhea Dempsey. Welcome, Rhea.
Good. Hi, Adam. Beautiful to be here with you.
Fantastic. And Rhea has over 40 years experience supporting women in birth, and she works as a educator, counsellor, a doula, and she has also written 2 books, which we'll mention at the end. And Rhea's really passionate about empowering women, making sure that they feel supported and have the best experience they can have. And we're recording this the day after International Women's Day. And yesterday, Rhea, you posted a picture of a candle, and some really, really beautiful words. So I'm just going to open my phone and look at that and share one of the sentences you used. I thought it was fantastic. Across time and cultures, women have endlessly found the capacity to open their bodies, their hearts, and lives to allow the generations to flow. That's fantastic. I love that. And I think it's a great way to start our discussion. What I'd like to do is get started with the question. The baseline for labour and birth is safety. What does the best start for baby look like? And is it valuable enough to reach for?
I mean, it encompasses such a lot, that question. I've sort of broken it down into 3 parts here. And just to say to anybody listening, maybe they're aware of it in terms of the notifications, but I'm from Australia. I'm sitting here in Melbourne. And I think many of the things I'm going to talk about, they're from the Australian experience, but I think that they're pretty much very similar over there or around in other sort of westernized countries that have got quite strong medicalized birth cultures. So,
right.
but I'm going to bring a few stats that relate particularly to Australia to answer that question in the first place, the first part of it, that thing about prioritizing safety or thinking about safety, which is so, so important. But for instance, when we think about what the stats are here in Australia around some of the key interventions and compare it to what the World Health Organization suggests would be appropriate levels of intervention, this speaks to the heart of this idea about safety and the reality of whether what is happening in our birth culture actually serves the need of safety, or whether there's some sort of much more medicalizing that's happening that then starts to shift that discussion. So for instance, the World Health Organization suggests that no country in the world would need an induction rate using synthetic oxytocin higher than 10%. So of course, what that's referencing is that, yes, there are women in all countries all around the world who because of their health or their well-being or something about the baby in their situation, that they need all this brilliant intervention that has been developed to keep some mums and babies safe who wouldn't otherwise be. So I'm sure
right.
you, Adam, and me, and all the people who are likely to be listening can acknowledge, yes, that's what we want. We want women and babies who are not going to be faring so well for a whole lot of reasons, to have them be cared for. So
Yeah.
what the World Health Organization is saying then, well, in terms of induction, that's getting the labour started, 10% would speak to those situations with mums and babies where there's some need for medical intervention or support for that labour to get started.
Right.
In Australia, however, our induction rate is 35%,
Wow.
as opposed to 10%. So does that mean in Australia that there are so many mothers and babies who are really imperiled in terms of their health and well-being and their capacity to birth? Or is that something about the system that women are giving birth in? Yeah. Then we have the World Health Organization also saying that no country in the world should need, for true medical need, a Caesar rate higher than between 10 and 15%. They also say that if countries have Caesar rates higher than 15%, that they are creating more health problems in their populations than they're solving. And in Australia, our Caesar rate is 37%. So we're definitely sitting into that. What the World Health Organization is suggesting is that we're making more problems for our population than we're solving in terms of that sort of Caesar rate.
Yeah.
So this speaks, these are just a few stats that can speak to this question about safety. Yes, of course, safety is paramount, but there's something about what's happening, certainly in Australian birth culture, and I would think in England and certainly in America as well, which is taking this into a very different direction than the true sort of medical need for safety that a small proportion of women. So if we look at those World Health Organization, probably somewhere between 10 to 20% of women would need some sort of intervention. I've just picked out 2 of them. But the lived reality is that in our birth culture, certainly, the stats are so much higher. So what is going on? And so for the women and maybe their partners who are listening to us and listening to the summit, who are interested in natural birth, then they need to be savvy. They need to be savvy about what their hopes and dreams are, what their lived reality in their body and their baby in terms of their health and well-being. But if they are healthy, well, women with well babies, then they need to also be savvy about what's going on in the birth culture that ideally would support them in their dream. But we know that with these stats being very high, and I know that in other countries, then maybe they're not as high as in Australia, but they're high. So to tease that out. And so that's what I'm going to do. That's what we're going to do in part of this talk that we're having. Yeah. So that's the first part of that question, about the safety issue. And then that beautiful thing about the best start for the baby. The best start for the baby. Well, for healthy women, healthy babies, the best start for the baby is for that whole hormonal dance that happens between the mum and the baby throughout the pregnancy, but also then coming to late in the pregnancy where the 2 of them are sort of starting to do that dance, preparing for the birth. Yeah. So the best start for the baby then is that, that the hormonal dance, because in reality for natural birth, the baby calls the shots. The baby sends up some hormonal messages to the mum and sort of knocking on the door and say, hey, mum, I'm ready. Sending up some hormonal messages. It's more complex than I would explain, but in particular, the baby is sending up an oxytocin message, or what I call queen oxytocin. This is the oxytocin that's coming from the mother's and the baby's body, and they're doing a dance together. Queen oxytocin, as distinct from synthetic oxytocin, which is used so prevalently in medicalized birth cultures. But queen oxytocin, the baby is sending up this whole yes, I'm ready. And the baby's been doing a few things in the womb to come down and get into a good position and so on, all of those things. And that the mother then gets that hormonal signal, and so then saying, oh yeah, darling, let's rock and roll, we're ready to go. And so then that is that physiological start to the labor, which the baby initiates and the mother follows. So for the best start for the baby, how brilliant that babies are sort of calling the shots in their own timing and their readiness. And many, in terms of the couples who work with me, all of them are wanting to open towards normal physiological childbirth or natural childbirth. And part of their motivation for doing that is because they want to honor the baby's timing in its own life and, as a determining being in its own life. That they're waiting on the baby for that timing. And occasionally some babies, they're not quite ready or they need a little bit of a tickle on, but generally that's what we're wanting to honor. That's what they're wanting to honor. So there's that. With the baby, the best thing for the baby is to be an active participant in its own birth. And there's a whole lot of other instincts that the baby that is in good position inside the mother's womb is using to nuzzle down into that cervix and to help to stimulate even more oxytocin through those oxytocin receptors, and to nuzzle through and help to open, as well as the mother's uterus is contracting and drawing up the uterus. So there's a bit of a little dance there going on between the mum and the baby.
Right.
And then that follows through also in the second stage, in the emerging of the baby. So that, I mean, it's simplistic to say it, but basically the mother just has to open her body. The baby's really doing the work in there to find its way through, and to then right at the time of the birth, the baby lifts its head up off its chin, off its chest, and birth that head, and then all those other bits follow. So it's for that best thing for the baby. We want that baby to be honored in its physiological vibrancy and so on, to do that work, I think. And certainly the couples who work with me, that's what they're wanting to honor. So
that's very interesting. Can I just reflect something back there, which I think is really important?
Yeah.
What you've described there is a reframing of the process towards the baby, which I think is really important. And I think that so much of the language of birth is as if the baby is an inactive participant. It's just an object, and you're not trimming that. You're completely reversing it. The baby is the center of activity. The way to think about the mother is that she is opening herself up mentally and physically for the baby to bring itself out.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah, I think that's really important. Sorry, you carry on.
No, and maybe just to, you mentioned that I've been doing this for over 40 years, yeah, and so I have had the privilege to see hundreds of babies born in the main normal physiological childbirth or natural childbirth. So, and those of us who've had that privilege, we see it. We see these babies doing that work, and we're honoring that baby in that work. So it's beautiful. So that's best for the baby. Also, the aspect of let me say about queen oxytocin. This very big distinction between oxytocin that is coming from the mother's body and the baby's body, or us as human beings. So there's a term, but I can't think of it, but it's really that, I'm going to say organic, that's not the word that's used, but that's what we would understand, as opposed to synthetic oxytocin,
yeah,
which is used so prevalently in the birth culture. So apparently they have the same chemical signature, but they work differently in the body. So
okay.
queen oxytocin is just a wonder of a hormone. I mean, it's the hormone in terms of, us as mammals, the tend and befriend hormone, the loving hormone, the bonding hormone, the social engagement hormone, the empathy hormone, the opening our hearts to people, being attuned in the way that we as mammals in our best selves can be attuned to one another. This is all mediated through oxytocin, through our body systems. Yeah.
Right.
Queen oxytocin also, so it's about the eyes, the contact, the tone of voice, all of these things are mediators for oxytocin. In terms of the birth, then, we also have the oxytocin drives the contractions. So we've got that, the mum and the baby are swimming in that, so they're primed to fall in love with that strong bonding, that human social engagement. And of course, those human babies, compared to many other mammal babies, those human babies are, they need a lot of love and care for quite a long time, and they need to be well bonded with and so on. So we have a great need as humans to have strong bonding around oxytocin, what queen oxytocin can do. So synthetic oxytocin, though, is just a one-hit wonder. Doesn't do any of the magic of the feelings and the bonding and the sweetness and so on. It can drive contractions. And so it has its place in situations where, for whatever reason, that's not happening. But let's not be fooled by thinking, because certainly in the birth culture here, we just talk about oxytocin. Oxytocin is as if oxytocin.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, what whoever's listening to this need to understand, no, they are not equivalents. And that if you're wanting best for your baby and best for that ongoing bonding and the firm foundation of that loving care and the nurturing of how a child might grow once it's born, then understanding the importance of the role of queen oxytocin and then therefore waiting on the baby and letting all of that stuff. So important,
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I might just take this moment to say something else that is starting to come through from the oxytocin researchers, queen oxytocin researchers.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't picked up my language yet. I haven't heard any of the researchers talking about queen oxytocin yet, but I'm hopeful. Is that a mother's oxytocin capacity is sort of passed to her baby through the birth process. This is what they're finding.
Okay.
And the capacity of the oxytocin receptors in the mother to then make that connection to the baby through the birth process, as I understand, but also obviously in the womb. And that when synthetic oxytocin goes into a mother's body, if it does during the labor, the synthetic oxytocin swamps the oxytocin receptors. And so then queen oxytocin is then no longer functioning. So
it interrupts the natural part of the oxytocin process.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there are various social researchers and even now attachment researchers starting to look seriously at what is this meaning in terms of this human engagement, social engagement, bonding, which is the foundation for attachment processes between mothers, fathers, and their children.
Yeah.
What are we messing with in terms of this oxytocin story, queen oxytocin story? If I keep talking about that, I could start crying. So let's just move a little bit.
It's a serious issue. So you're saying that the research on that is going on, and there's some initial findings that will probably get built on, which are saying that we are not replacing like with like when we're using synthetic oxytocin. We're using something that can drive the contractions, but it misses a lot of other things, and it interrupts things that are crucial to bonding and attachment between mother and baby.
So we can get the baby born, but is some of this in the best interest, as the question is, in the best interest of the best of the baby? So we have that, the queen oxytocin, protecting the baby from the synthetic oxytocin and the drug systems and what have you. I think would be in the best interest of the baby. We want that baby when it's born to be vital and awake and engaged and ready to eye contact with the mum and do that bonding with. Yeah, so we want that. So we want that's best. I think also there's that thing about the baby's sort of instinctive needs. This one taps into also some of the stuff during the pregnancy. So what are the baby's instinctive needs when it's born? It's inside the mother's body. It knows the mother. It knows the rhythm of the mother's body. It's got a sense of the smell of the baby because the baby's been drinking, swallowing the amniotic fluid. It's getting a sense of what that tastes like. Out of that, the thoughts is that also gives the baby sort of a sense of what the smell of the mother would be. These are all the bonding triggers for the baby when the baby is born, to let it know that, well, I'm here, I'm born, and I'm in this familiar and safe place with the smell, the taste, the sound of the mother's voice.
Right.
I mean, from 7 months in the womb, the baby, pretty well its hearing is complete. So it's hearing the mother's voice in all its range from singing to crying to yelling to barracking to talking sweetly to all of that range is knowing the mother's voice. So that when then the baby is born and through the labor, the baby is also still hearing the mother's voice. And then when that bonding, that's stimulated by queen oxytocin, and the mother is so sweetly taking her baby, and the eye contact and saying such sweet things, usually, you know, that beautiful soft voice or the excited voice, then the baby knows it's, you know, it's here, it's familiar territory, it's safe, I'm safe, and they can settle their all those systems in their body that have had to do that work and then make those big changes once they come out into the world. That's all happening in that sort of safety of the familiar, which is the mother's body. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that later on in one of the later questions that we're going to look at. But all of this is in the baby's best interest.
So I just wanted to stop you there and just recognize how different that image is from a lot of the imagery that we see in TV and entertainment world around what happens when a baby arrives in the world. And that image that we see so often in drama and TV is traumatic. It's screaming. The baby is screaming, and people are running around, and it seems like an emergency. And what you describe is something very, very different, which is the baby arriving, skin to skin contact with its mother, and that feeling safe because it knows and recognizes the smell, the feel, the touch, the voice, and then starting to focus on its mother, you know, appearing to look at her intently, even though it has still some way to go in terms of sight. And that is really important to recognize that as being, again, this is the second thing we've talked about. It's completely different to so much that people have been kind of brought to expect, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, really, you see it when you're seeing normal birth unfold, natural birth unfold, that as the baby comes out, the mother is instinctively reaches to the baby to take the baby to her breast, to her chest, to her heart. And as then, we're going off question, but I mean, this is so beautiful.
It's okay.
In that sense, when it's undisturbed and there's a sort of an instinct, the mother is in an instinctive mode as the baby is, that mothers sort of, that they sometimes will lick their baby's head, smell their baby's head,
Right.
They'll suck their baby's fingers, they will look at the number of fingers and toes. This seems to be a very primal sort of thing to look.
Yeah,
I guess it's all about, is the baby okay? They'll talk to the baby in that beautiful, what we now call prosody, you know, that sing-song sort of voice.
Right.
And the babies, as the mother is talking to the baby will orient its head towards the mother. So the babies haven't got full control of their limbs as yet, but they will orient their head towards the mother's voice, and they will also sort of reach their hands towards the mother. And the mother is, of course, gazing into the baby's eyes. So there's a whole sort of hormonally orchestrated, in undisturbed birth, dance between that mum and the baby that are more complex in terms of the hormones, but certainly queen oxytocin is driving so much of that behavior.
Yeah, and that is I'll just a quick word for the dads here. Yes. There's a moment to witness. I may start crying in a moment because I've got 4 children, and that moment is an extraordinary moment to be there for, and to have supported a woman to bring the baby to that point is an amazing thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, just to say something else specifically to the dads, if they're watching, and if they're not, hopefully they could be, should be, or the women can pass it on. So that thing about the baby's hearing being complete at 7 months in the womb.
Yeah.
So not only is the baby becoming very aware of the mother's voice, but the baby is also sort of hearing, not as clearly as we will come to hear, but is hearing the tone and of the key people around the mother. So ideally, fathers are talking lots to those babies.
Yes.
Specifically talking to the baby, so that the baby is bonded to the father's voice, because
Yeah.
there's a bit of research looking at like who is around the baby, the mother and the baby, the most, and whose voices are the baby bonding to. So sometimes their suggestion is that it could be the co-workers of the mother, as opposed to, particularly for the couple, you know, they get home at the end of a busy day and they put the telly on and they don't really speak to one another very much and so on. So fathers start reading the baby books to the baby, start singing to the baby, start talking so much. We want that baby
in late pregnancy, from late pregnancy onwards.
Onward. And I think that I've seen it too in births, you know, that if the mother is getting quite distressed, that sometimes fathers can just speak very quietly to the baby during the labor, and that helps them. So there's a whole lot of magic that we can do when we understand what the sort of biological realities of the human mammal. So that's a beautiful thing for fathers to get onto.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic.
I think that, so they're the key things that I want to say in answer to that aspect of the question, that first question. And the final part of that question you premise is is it valuable enough? Is this thing of natural birth, and is it valuable enough? I think I'm not really the person to ask. I'm very biased. And you know, I've had home births myself, and I've had 5 grandchildren, all of whom have been home birth babies. And in Australia, to have a home birth, it's a very expensive process. So, yeah, I personally think, yes, it's valuable enough. But I think to expand that out, I think as a culture, we're losing something so fundamentally human, and in those, you know, the magic of that physiological process unfolding. So yeah, I think it's valuable enough.
I think I agree with you. I think that the way you've described these things, it reminds us that the human body is incredible, and everything that happens in this process, as in other physiological processes, has a purpose, and we interrupt that at our peril. And I think that you know, I want to bring us back to that question about safety as the baseline. I think that a lot of the conflict around that question of safety occurs because in the medical system, that's a very narrow question, whereas for a human, a family, that's a much broader question, isn't it? And so it's that's where the conflict, I think, often arises, is that you're presented in a hospital environment. You may be presented with a very narrow binary choice without really the context, which is what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the context that helps you see that sounds like a very obvious yes/no decision, but actually there's a lot more to it than that. Fantastic. Okay, thank you. So if I can take you to the second question, and focusing now on pregnancy. So what are the most important choices and things that mother and her support group can do in pregnancy to support that best start?
Yeah. Of course, ideally, and I imagine across time and cultures, you know, it probably would have been that as women are coming into their childbearing years and preparing, ready to have a baby, that there's some preconception care in terms of, you know, being mindful of health and well-being. And of course, we know, particularly in contemporary times, that not smoking, not drinking alcohol and so on, that these things have a lived reality in terms of being so important. So that thing of preparing the body and preparing the health and well-being of the mother is so important. I mean, there's so much more that we need to do for many women at the social level and the support systems around them, so that they can be in that good health as they
Yeah.
conceive and have their babies. So that's certainly the foundation that we would have to have those healthy babies come. So there's so much that I can say, but the key, I want to just pick out some key points. So one is beautiful, beautiful work. If I remember, it comes from Sweden, and it's reasonably recent. It comes particularly into its own in late pregnancy, where, that thing about mothers being attuned to their babies and their baby's movements and so on, to have a sense of, is the baby well, or is the baby not doing so well at the moment, and so on. So this it's called mind fetalness. What a great play on words, mind fetalness. Play on it is, of course, mindfulness, but being mindful of the fetus, the baby. And so I would encourage anybody who's listening to, just as you'd imagine it would be spelt, one word, mind fetalness, to Google it, and you'll get onto a great website that is giving a whole lot of stuff about really understanding the baby's movements and its sleep pattern and its movement pattern. And to start that sort of, they make suggestions about at what stage. I think they're talking about like at 32 weeks to start to really get a sense of taking daily. They suggest to daily take 10 minutes, quarter of an hour at a time when the baby is active, because of course they're active, they sleep, they have a sleep-wake cycles as they're forever going to have, and for the mother to become attuned to the sort of the rhythm and the style and the energy, I guess, of how the movements feel, which will change as the baby gets bigger, as it can no longer do backflips and front somersaults and things. It's a bit more taking up more of the space, but nonetheless, some quality of the movement and the baby's sort of sleep and wake rhythm, that for the mother to attune to this is part of the bonding, of course. And often, of course, when women are doing that, they'll be talking to the baby as it's moving and things as well. So it serves a lot of the bonding processes. So it's bonding, but also it's if you like, offering information that will be like grounded intuition, intuition, which is so important in terms of the birth. It's so important across the life of the kid. Very good to have some grounded intuition before they hit teenage years, I can tell you. But anyway, let's not go there just yet. But this grounded intuition, let's say then we're going into the birth situation, and particularly if women are in a fairly medicalized situation, and it's being suggested that they're worried about the baby and they want to put the monitor on or do this or do that. Then how, what's the mother? Often we say for women who, that they should be going through this process that we call brain, benefits, risks, BRA, alternatives.
Right.
I being about intuition. And N, does this have to happen now, as a way of trying to get a sense of, well, you're suggesting this, but do I really need to do it? Is it just what you would rather do? All of that. So intuition, how does a mother, because we need to know the difference between our intuition and our fear. And as I say, you certainly need to know that difference before you have teenagers. So what are women basing their intuition on? So here, this mind fetalness, such a beautiful thing to be doing, but really it's the foundations of, if the mother then in the labor is feeling like, oh yeah, the baby has a sleep always, at this time in the afternoon, the baby is always asleep. And the staff are saying, oh, the baby's very quiet. Yeah, it is very quiet. That's totally what I expect at this point. Or if maybe the baby is just going crazy in the womb and in all sorts of movements that the mother has never felt before, well, then maybe that gives her a feeling, I feel like there is something that's not quite in keeping with my sense of the baby. So I think that during pregnancy, to really tune into that mind fetalness and start to build that intuitive sense of the baby's rhythm can only stand the mum and the baby in good stead for not only the birth, but also because it's going to continue on once the baby's out, about when it will be sleeping and waking and so on. So it's a beautiful gift, I think, to check out that one. So that's one thing that I would say. The
Yeah.
other thing, I talked about the voice, so lots of talking and singing to the baby and so on. The thing then about the baby's position in the womb
Yeah.
is so important for how the birth is going to unfold. And I think that probably, I'm not sure if the people listening are familiar with, but if they're not, they should be, coming out of America, Spinning Babies. So I guess Spinning Babies is the organization that has drawn together with Gail, drawing together so much of the knowledge that we have about the baby's position in the womb and
Yeah.
how the mother's body and the positions that the mother generally is habitually, being in her during the pregnancy can be influencing the position that the baby gets in the womb, of course, because the baby is trying to fit the pelvis and so on as it finds it in terms of what the mother's doing. So Spinning Babies really, I think, is brilliant for the contemporary times when so many women, because I mean, way back, and maybe for a lot of women still, they're very active. So they're standing, they're leaning, they're squatting, they
Right.
might be doing their yoga, or they might be doing their gardening or what have you. So there's a whole
Yes.
range
Yeah.
of movements that the baby is adjusting to so that the pelvis is opening in different ways and making space for the baby. But of course, many women and working late in the pregnancy are sitting on chairs, lounging on the hanging out on the couch and what have you, all of which are positions that are pretty well set up to get that baby to swing round and get into those not favorable positions, which makes for tougher movements for the mother and the baby. So for women in pregnancy, particularly late pregnancy, to be very attuned to what they're doing in terms of their own movement with their body and ensuring that they're helping that baby to get into the most favorable position for the straightforward birth.
And I think you're saying that there's a difference between mobility in a narrow sense, which is doing, for example, walking regularly. That itself is not as beneficial as a range of physical movements that flex the body, give different signals to the baby. That's going to be a good thing to do. So walking is good. A wider range of things is better.
I think it's that thing, wider range is good, walking is brilliant. It's to counteract for women if their work situation or how much of the time are they spending in much more of a sedentary, sitting, leaning, that then they need to be doing other movements to, and Spinning Babies gives a whole lot of, the daily essentials in terms of the things that that women can do in terms of positions and to encourage that baby. And of course, you'll love it. Women, once they're laboring, you want that baby to be in that perfect position because it makes for a shorter labor and not so demanding and so on. So it's time and energy well spent before the labor.
Right.
So that's another aspect. Then one other thing, and this relates again, I talk a lot about this with the couples that I work with, is in late pregnancy, I'm doing this in a very simple way. It's much more complex, but it seems to make the point. So in late pregnancy, are women able to surrender to the rhythm of their body? So are they able to have a rest or a sleep or some sort of movement or walking or relaxing or whatever, according to what their energy and what their body is asking in late pregnancy? Or are they, because of work or family situations or whatever their life situation, having to follow a clock? They have to get up at this time, or they have to eat at that time, or they have to, because of the dictates of the rhythm of their day. And simplistically, then what we would say, if the mother can follow her body's own rhythms, she's more likely to be in an oxytocin system.
Okay.
More complex than this. If she is needing in late pregnancy to follow the dictates of a clock or the rhythm of a particular day and even if she's feeling like really what she needs is a rest now, but she's got to keep going and doing this and doing this. This is more of an adrenaline system in the body.
Yeah.
And you know that thing about going back to queen oxytocin or induction rates or what have you with synthetic oxytocin,
Yeah.
like the mother has to be in an oxytocin system for the baby to be knocking on the door with its oxytocin for the mother to, but for some women, of course, they can be physically very stressed or their life situation can be very stressed and they've got a lot of adrenaline and they're not really picking up there's not an oxytocin match to
yes, that's going to dominate. It's dominate and prevent the oxytocin system kicking in. Yeah.
So that thing of in late pregnancy, to be mindful of that. And then also I would say that during pregnancy, particularly late pregnancy, that women ideally will habituate themselves to some form of relaxation process. So I don't think it matters. I don't think there's any magic about what type it is, just something that she finds useful. It could be just listening to classical music, or it could be listening to some particular meditation, but to habituate herself to it, to be doing it regularly every 2-3 days, half an hour or so that it becomes embedded. Because of course this is also, the baby is getting habituated to this relaxation music, which is so it's going to be keep on giving to you after the baby's born when you're wanting to help the baby chill out or yourself to chill out. So getting habituated, also useful during the labor in some of those challenging parts of the labor. So partners need to know what this music is so that they can feed it back to the woman if she's needing it in the labor. And but that requires putting some time and regular time to engage so that becomes, so that when it's switched on, we just go into that automatic relaxation because you become habituated.
Yes, and we get out, we keep the adrenaline system at bay, basically. Yeah,
because
got it.
Maybe some of the other speakers are talking about adrenaline, but if adrenaline is running in the mother's body, then the labor is not going to be. If she's feeling not safe, and it's not safe, if we think about our, way back in our prehistory, and if our forebears didn't feel safe because there's a tiger or a this or a that, they're not going to open their bodies and let their babies out. So this is still runs in our bodies. We think we're so modern. No.
Yeah.
It's all still very primal in there when it comes to these things. So we don't want to have that adrenaline driving everything because it's not going to go well for the labor. So I think I'd answered that. I mean, there's so many more things to say, but there's some.
Of course, there's always more to say. Yeah. That's really great. I want to take us on to talking about birth choices, and I think you've touched on this a lot already because you've been talking about the oxytocin system, and there's an implication about choices there, isn't there? Or at least a consequential thing about choices. But could you just give a summary of what you think the important choices are and how the mothers who are tuned in trying to facilitate the oxytocin system, how do they approach the birth event?
Okay, so talking about the Australian system, but it would be similar in England. I'm not sure in America actually how this would be, but certainly like the choice of caregivers starts to become very important. And certainly caregivers in terms of, for some women, of course, maybe they're not so healthy and their babies are not so healthy and they need really specialist medical care, and very privileged if we live in countries where we can access that care if this is what the mother and the baby need.
Yeah.
Because there are many women around the world, of course, who need some of that very highly specialized medical care and they can't access it. So many of us are privileged that we can if we need it. We're talking here, though, about natural birth. And given the whole thing about the stats, then it's about trying to find the pockets in the care system that are going to be supportive of normal physiological childbirth or of natural birth. And
Yeah.
so for women who have that dream, that hope to have that natural birth, then they need to be on the case about the sort of care that they will tap into. And
Yeah.
certainly in Australia, I mean, what the research, not only Australia, but the research around the world is that for natural birth, undisturbed birth, best care is with continuity of midwifery care. And by continuity, we mean that you're engaging with a midwife or a team of midwives who you get to know throughout the pregnancy. And if we think about this in terms of oxytocin or adrenaline, so that feeling of safety, in knowing people and that you're all on the same page. So this is so important. So that continuity of care, that would be ideal. We have some birth centers. We have, I mean, home birth, of course, you get that continuity as well as the safety of the feeling in the home and so on. So those sort of choices are being supported. In standard care here in Australia and possibly in the other countries that may be involved in standard care, the practitioners, the midwives or the obstetric team that will be with the mother during the labor will be strangers to her. And she will be a stranger to them. And so with all the goodwill in the world and the best intentions, in a heightened state like a labor, if you're then with strangers and don't know where they're coming from or how it all fits, then this isn't so good for the hormones. So that continuity would be the gold standard. We would want it to be the standard care as opposed to the pinnacle of the gold standard. That's the hope. That's the big drivers in Australia that we're trying to do. Doulas worldwide, I think there's a rise in the thing about doulas, and they, in a way, are filling the gaps, to my understanding, and being a doula myself, that they're often the ones offering the continuity of care. Even though we don't have the medical expertise or so on, but we're offering that sort of relational safety because you're engaging with the woman and their partners through the pregnancy or part of the last part of the pregnancy and through the birth and often then in the postnatal period. But ideally, that continuity of care with the midwives would be the thing. So that's one thing, caregivers, that can make a big difference because it makes a big difference in the hormones, so that then it makes a big difference in terms of how the birth's going to unfold. We then have the birth space itself. So the birth space. Now, again, in Australia, we've got some brilliant midwifery researchers, world-renowned, and there's a fantastic theorizing around birth space. It's called birth territory. It's the idea about birth territory. And the theory of birth territory is not only about the physical space, but also about the sort of power dynamics in that space and so on, which are very important. But just to talk about it in terms of the physical space, the language is so evocative. So they talk about women are either going to be giving birth in a surveillance room, which is really the classic hospital labor room, which looks a bit more like an intensive care ward than anything that we might think has a relationship to physiological surrender. So they talk about a surveillance room, and all of that connotates, and certainly in Australia pretty well all the birth spaces are surveillance rooms. And then they contrast that with a sanctum space. I mean, the language is so potent. So a sanctum space. So the sanctum space is we feel like reverence. We feel that that this space is set up for a particular purpose, which is full of love and if you surrender and so on, and protective and what have you. So that, I mean, anybody who can feel the strength of this might want to do some more research on Google that birth territory and the Australian midwifery researchers that talk about it. I could go on this could be a whole other talk, but and in that sanctum space, So maybe birth centers are set up with that sanctum space. But there is space for movement. The clinical hospital bed is not the centerpiece, because when that, like in the surveillance room, the bed is the centerpiece. When the mother walks into the room, the bed is sort of screaming at her, well, get up on here, be still, be quiet, and we're going to do things to you. So the sanctum space will have places for her to recline. It might have a bed, a double bed somewhere in the corner. It will have, the ball, something to hang from, something to kneel and to lean, and all of the shift and movements that women will move around in. And of course, we'll have a tub or a pool for water immersion, as that has been really a whole part of the helping to facilitate queen oxytocin, helping to diminish the adrenaline, and also giving the mother, a sort of an ease of movement in that, in the deeper water that she can float a little bit and move around in. And of course, in a way, it's like the mother then is held in that water, in the way the baby is held in the waters in the womb. So they're sort of in a little bit of a vibe with one another. So sanctum space. So ideally, women can find and hunt down these sort of spaces. Or what I would say is that the big challenge for many couples who are going into the hospital system here is they've got to quickly, somehow or other, try and transform a surveillance room into a sanctum.
Yeah. And it sounds really hard, but there are definitely things you can do that can create the cues and the sense that can help, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. And in fact, I'll say it now, but I was going to say it to the thing. One of the things that partners should do, not could do, should do, is that if you're going into a hospital space that is a surveillance room, that, okay, yeah, before I got involved in the birth scene, I used to be a physical education teacher and outdoor adventure facilitator. So you can hear it coming out now. So they need to set up a birth circuit. Yeah. So a birth circuit. Oh, I'm not going to go through them all. People can find it. I do have this information, I think, in my books and what have you. But a place to do this and a place to do that and a place for leaning, a place for sleeping,
a variety of activities and little micro spaces. Yeah.
And the dim lights and the music and to create that sanctum space in that surveillance room. And that needs to be set up as soon as they get in there. And ideally, they're not going in until she's in good, strong labor, so that the mother, she's had to adjust in the car probably, but now she wants to get back in that groove and because I can tell you, a labor can be going brilliantly if but for want of one cushion on that chair, which is supposed to be at that height and not at that height. And that can be the difference between coping and not coping in those moments. Partners need to be aware of these things.
Yeah.
So that birth circuit and setting up that room. And in Australia, there are some of the midwives in some of the places, they're putting the fairy lights around and so that couples are coming into a surveillance room that has been modified. But oftentimes it's not the case. And so couples need to be planning that and doing that themselves. So that's one of the things I would offer. I want to just say another thing about water immersion. And even the pools and, this is your beautiful work. So because I've been around for so long, when we started with the water births and being in water for laboring, we were thinking of it in terms of physiology. Not about comfort. I'll probably talk about this a bit more later on in terms of the pain issues, because this is it's a subtle but very important difference. I think that maybe Adam, I haven't said, but I do a lot of birth debriefing. I do far, far, far too much birth debriefing.
Okay.
And there are a few key themes that come through, and one of the themes that I'm hearing more and more and more is that the idea of the bath or the tub has been hijacked, as many things have been hijacked in terms of the pain issue about labor, by the epidural. Or in my language, I would say the fucking epidural, which is hijack the mindset, hijack the cultural mindset, hijack the social mindset, hijacked even for women who will be listening here who are passionate about natural birth. They're living in a culture that is, I'm just saying it simplistically, that the epidural, because it's no longer now. Women in labor, there would be always points, no matter how much breathing work and there's all of those things. There would be points in labor where the mother would be saying, you know, oh, help me, or it's too much, or, you know, whinging, whining, something like that. None of that anymore. What we get now is at those points that I call crises of confidence, what we hear is, get me the fucking epidural. It's so colonized and taken over the acculturation, so that then what is starting to happen, as I hear from midwives who I work with and talk with, as well as the birth debriefing, is that the tub is seen as, in early labor, a comfort measure to keep you going until you then get the epidural. So it's part of this idea that women in labor should be comfortable. I don't think across time and cultures women have ever thought that they're supposed to be comfortable when they're laboring. They're supposed to be working. They're supposed to be working. And so the water birth stuff, as I understood it from way back when, was about when women were in strong labor, and in particular we talk about this sort of magic sort of 7 centimeter mark. And not that you have to be doing vaginal examination to do that. You see it in the behaviors of the mother. As the brain waves are shifting and changing, and she's dropping into what I call the evolutionary regression. And so then we're seeing primal woman come out, and she hasn't got this brilliant brain that we're usually working with. The brain waves are slowing down. She's dropping deeply in. As her brain waves slow down, she's now in sync with the baby's brain waves. So they are in an intuitive, instinctive connection now. And this happens around about 7 centimeters. There's work to be, they need some breathing skills. They need some skills to get, but if it's undisturbed, they are going to drop deeply in it at that point. And this is the point where the tub, in my understanding and the understanding that we used to have way back in the early home births with water, was that this is the point for women to get into the tub, because it enhances deep drop down into this sort of primal territory. Not as comfort in early labor, tend to slow things down if they're using it as a comfort measure in early.
Okay.
So that brilliance of the immersion is not only gives that comfort, it does give comfort, but that's not the main point of it. The main point of it is to enhance the physiology, and then of course when the baby comes out and the baby comes through the water, and just it's also it creates a protective space. The mother is more
a sense of privacy and all those things.
So many brilliant things. Occasionally, if it's a very long pre and early labor and the mother is getting exhausted, sometimes getting a tub, brilliant. You can knock it on the head and give her a few hours or so of sleep and rest and then come back to it. But in terms of this equating of comfort, that's what women should be having in labor, and that the epidural is the thing. The tub is somehow or other in some ways getting a bit caught up into that. So I'm passionately talking about, no, that's not the case. The tub has got a magic to it. So I just want to talk a little bit more about the pain issue. I mean, in Australia, apparently people call me the pain queen. It's a little bit tricky thinking about it, but apparently that's because I talk a lot about it. So the cultural mindset, I think the epidural has really colonized the cultural mindset. But in the context of birth, and here's the phys ed teacher and me coming out as well, that because mainly births happen in hospitals, and pain in a more general hospital context is about things going wrong in the body, yeah, damage and disease and illness and so on, and that what's totally appropriate in that situation is pain relief for supporting the person to be in a more comfortable situation and to be able to use their vital energies for the healing that's needed. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. We place birth into that situation, and in the main, birth is a physiologically demanding process that has, it's complex, it's sort of clumsy to say it, but functional physiological pain. Yeah,
Yeah.
body's working hard in a healthy way, but challenging.
Yeah.
So that functional physiological pain. And I don't know about you, but I mean, in Australia and in other countries, you know, lots of people get up early in the morning to go pound the pavements or ride their bikes or do this or do that or go to the gym.
Go to the gym. Yeah.
Lift weights and whatever, in order to work with functional physiological pain for their health and well-being and to feel their potency and power. Yeah. And we celebrate that and think that that's brilliant. Normal physiological childbirth is really much more akin to that, has more to do with that than it does to, you know, the medical story of things going wrong and then you poor thing and we've got to keep you safe for healing and so on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So there's some midwifery theorizing around this as well that taps into this, which is talking about midwives. So a midwive's attitude to pain as distinct from a nurse's attitude towards pain, which is more of a pain relief mindset. I mean, a lot of people, if they've been in hospital for things going wrong, you know, the nurse will probably, you know, what's your pain at the moment? You know, is it this or is it that? And if it's a 2 or 3, then maybe it's Panadol, and if it's a 10 or something, then maybe it's oxytocin or something. Totally appropriate in a situation with things going wrong.
Yeah.
In a situation where everything is going right, but it's challenging and demanding, which is really much more of a working with pain philosophy and set of skills, so that then them being able to move and change position, being able to use water for being supported to be working with that pain and so on, then that's quite a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Our birth culture here is mainly premised around pain relief. This is what women are going to come up against. And of course, then the cultural mindset about you poor thing, it's too much for you. We demonize labor pain now rather than seeing it as part of a healthy expression of a body working strong and hard.
Yeah.
You poor thing, it's too much for you. The epidural, you know, you can sleep or you can play Angry Birds and then eventually the baby will be born. And so on. So this conflict between a birth culture that is premised around pain relief and women's wishes and hopes for normal physiological childbirth, which requires working with the functional physiological pain of this brilliant process. So is that. I also, in my first book particularly, talk about, and this is the phys ed teacher in me again, as a phys ed teacher and an outdoor adventure sort of facilitator and what have you, many of us wouldn't do the things that we hope and that we have intention to do if we didn't have somebody around us who knew a thing or two about how to achieve what it is that we're trying to do. Because there are those times, and I don't know, abseiling or finishing those reps with the weights or what have you, or whatever you might think about, or on the footy field or on the basketball field, the netball field. There are moments that I have come to call crises of confidence. It feels like it's too much, it's too long, it's too strong, it's too painful, it's too this, I'm too tired, I'm too that, blah, blah, blah. All of those crises of confidence. Some of us have it before we get up in the morning at 7 o'clock to do that run with our partners or whatever. But in labor, there are predictable points in the labor which are escalating the intensity, which is the beautiful design of how the labor ideally would be going for normal birth, for natural birth. There are predictable points where there are jump up points in terms of the contractions getting longer, stronger, closer together, doing brilliant work. And that those points in cultures which are saying, you poor thing, it's too much for you, they can really blow out of proportion in terms of women then crumbling and feeling like, it's too much,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. So there's seduction points in terms of the epidural. So that crisis of confidence and understanding that is so important. And then to move to partners, this is so important for partners to understand that there will be these crumbling points, these vulnerable points in the labor where the woman feels like it is too much, or she's allowed to have a bit of a cry or a bit of a stamp and a bit of a expression of frustration or whatever. She's allowed to do those things, as well as then finding her way through. So those crises of confidence, this is what experienced midwives who have the skills to support normal physiological childbirth, they know that these are points where you come in a bit closer and you breathe with the mother, or you encourage her to shift from here to there, or now get in the tub, or what have you. But partners, they're caught up in the cultural mindset as well about the poor thing, she's suffering.
Yeah.
The poor thing, it's too much. The poor thing, the epidural. Or they themselves are in a lot of emotional distress, witnessing this and feeling a sort of a helplessness about it. So
Absolutely.
the epidural is just brilliant for the partner, because then nobody has to do any emotion work whatsoever. We're just playing Angry Birds and we're watching the telly. So that difference between working with pain versus pain relief is a huge thing to have to understand for anybody watching who wants to have a go at natural birth. Partners also need to understand this. They need to understand that if they can't hold it together through a crisis of confidence, they're better to get out of the room and go and have a cup of tea and hope and trust that the midwife can hold that together. Or if you're at a home birth and the midwives keep sending you out to get supplies, it's usually because they can see you just about to crumble, and they don't want that to happen, because that can be problematic. So
I'm now racking my brain to imagine, was I that guy?
So support people, whether it's partner or who, they need to be brave in the face of the mother's vulnerability, in the face of the mother's concern about, can she keep going? They need to be brave, not feel like they need to save. This is so crucial.
Supporting, but with being brave rather than panicking and reaching for solutions.
Because often when she's in this crisis of confidence, so they don't last forever. There's not the whole of the labor. Maybe in a beautifully unfolding labor, a crisis of confidence might come, and 4 or 5 contractions, 6 contractions, hairy contractions, that if we can walk her through them, we can sing with her, we can dance with her, we can breathe with her, eye contact and whatever, then she gets on a new groove. So this is something for partners to know. And they also need to know, remember I talked about habituating to relaxation and music. Partners absolutely need to know what that is, so that they know that if those moments of distress come forward, that they can really help to chill her, to get into a rhythm. And so they're the things that I would say. Many other things I could say about dads and partners. Crucial ones for natural birth.
I think that's really helpful. Sorry.
We're going to just jump to that last question now.
So the last question is around that point at which the baby is skin to skin with the mother. What's important from that point on, and for continuing that journey to a fantastic start for the mother and baby? What's important?
So I alluded to this a bit before, in terms of the baby's instinctive needs for the eye contact, the sound of the voice, the smell, the taste, and what have you, that this is all part of that skin to skin and so on. I mean, I think there is separate to how the baby might emerge from the mother's body. So if it's natural birth or normal physiological birth, undisturbed birth, these things happen at an instinctive level, because the whole hormonal system, the mother has dropped into that deeper brainwave, that evolutionary regression, that primal woman's coming out. So this happens just so beautifully as an instinctive response, mother and baby.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of research now talking about the golden hour. Yeah, the golden hour after birth, and the prioritizing of the skin to skin,
Yeah.
the prioritizing then of not disturbing that and allow the baby to naturally, that instinctive capacity, which I didn't mention before, of the baby to crawl, the breast crawl, like other mammals. They can smell, they can taste, they can target the area if we don't disturb them. And so that golden hour, that skin to skin, this is setting up, even in a situation if the birth hasn't been the natural birth that has been planned and so on, there is a growing sort of body of work and research that says, once the baby's born, do this.
Yeah.
It will naturally flow from natural birth, but even in a situation if that's not the case, then this is what needs to be protected, this golden hour. Okay. And there's again some more research out of Australia where there's a beautiful word called pro-nurturance. Pro-nurturance. Okay. And this is around, again, sort of facilitating this instinctive, instant, overwhelming love that's happening between the mother and the baby. And so around this time needs to be protected, and can be protected with awareness regardless of how the baby is born. It comes so beautifully, naturally flows on in that natural birth. So there's that. And then there's also, and again, we here in Australia have one of the big international oxytocin researchers, Dr. Sarah Buckley, and she's starting to talk about, as are other researchers, about filling the hormonal gaps. Yeah. Okay. Given that in westernized cultures, not only in Australia, but normal physiological childbirth or natural birth or undisturbed birth is getting to be very rare. How do we then protect at least something about this magic hour? And so, in a way, as I said before, I think doulas are sort of filling some of the gaps in terms of what midwives would have used to have done.
Right.
Maybe that's not good grammar, but so there's filling the gaps there. And then in terms of this golden hour and ongoing, filling some of those hormonal gaps in terms of queen oxytocin, we're wanting to support queen oxytocin now, even if we haven't supported it during the labor. So the golden hour, breast crawl, breastfeeding in that golden hour, and of course continuing to breastfeed and support breastfeeding.
Yeah.
We then have going further into not just in those early hours or days, but thinking in terms of the early months with a baby, a human baby. We're wanting to support that feeling of safety in the baby and the connectedness and the bonding, is also then, of course, continuing breastfeeding, but also co-sleeping. And I mean, in England, you've got the best sleep researchers in the world that are totally on the case about supporting co-sleeping, safe co-sleeping. Breastfeeding and safe co-sleeping go together like this. Yeah. Separate the two, then that's a more complex issue. So breastfeeding, co-sleeping, and then of course baby wearing. So these are aspects of the way we can do that early, or if not early, as long as you can, which are part of the thing of the nurturing and the baby feeling safe, and the hormonal story between the mum or the dad or the grandmas or whoever to be in more of an oxytocin attuned, tending, befriending, loving, caring, nurturing. We want more of it in the world. Queen oxytocin doing it. So they would be the things that flow on naturally in a natural birth, but we can, we're not like other mammals. We do have this creative human brain. We can be creative if things don't go straightforwardly and we're not able to facilitate the instinctive process. We can think it through design and consciously choose these things. So they're things to be mindful of as well.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that has been really a wonderful discussion, and I think the way that you've talked about the um, the facilitation, the mother opening, the power of that, the baby leading the process. I think that has been is such a good and useful imagery for people, and giving mothers, the confidence to tune in, to listen, to trust in what they are picking up about their baby in pregnancy, and that how powerful that is in terms of the continuing through the birth process to the baby being born. Just fantastic. Really, really great. Thank you so much for coming and doing that with us. Really appreciate it, Rhea. Now, if
I love everybody,
fantastic.
Yes, yeah,
absolutely. If people want to learn more about the stuff that you have done and go deeper into some things we talked about, I think you've got a variety of steps, including you've written 2 books, haven't you?
I have, and
I
just happen to have them here.
And how about that?
Yeah, surprise. This is the
So
first
birth
one.
with confidence.
This one talks more about the pain issues and the crisis of confidence, like that. And the second one, in fact, we haven't even begun to talk about some of the things in the second one, because it goes much more into, if you like, the mother's, some of the deeper psychological and emotional and relational things that can make women maybe feel unsafe.
Yeah.
So the second one is looking more deeply at some of the psychological and emotional and life stories and traumas that may come forward and be part of us, like, and create a deeper resonance of pain in the situation. So you can see it's deeper. Go.
Yeah, so, and that was written in the COVID period, wasn't it? It's about 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah.
It was written before that, but then I haven't had a chance to go out and party with it because we had COVID. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a toddler. I haven't been able to nurture it out into the world so much. But
okay, so
it's juicy.
Yeah, fantastic, and also obviously we've got your website and your Instagram, and those links are available in the on the event website. So different ways people can go deeper in some of the things we talked about, but also connect with you. That's really great. So we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, and it's great to talk to you. I know that it's quite late now in Melbourne, isn't it? So we're going to let you enjoy the rest of your evening. But thank you again, Rhea.
Well, Adam, thank you very much, and wish everybody well, and the whole summit that it goes so beautifully and starts to be an influence.
Fantastic, thank you.